So we're going to go ahead and jump in to outline the differences between Cosima and Iris. Now, important changes in Cosima in comparison to Iris, the first being that there's no differentiation of workflows that will be identified, such as QC, RP, DC, QC, TG, etc., as they were in Iris. The differentiation of a complaint is going to take place by its default code. Now, there's a long list of default codes to choose from in Cosima, and just an example here that code number 210 is a material fault, and that's how you're going to differentiate between quality complaints, delivery complaints, non-complaints, terms complaints, etc. There's the possibility to access the complaint at any time during the complaint handling, meaning that there's no strict workflow that's implemented that the complaint is going to follow. Now, there is a general flow that the complaint follows. However, anyone that has access to the complaint can go in and make an edit where needed at any time during the complaint handling. There are no direct task assignments in Cosima, so activities are going to have to be determined based on knowledge of the subject and magnitude of the complaint. Now, there are tasks that can be assigned automatically. However, there are some that are going to have to be assigned manually, which we'll see during the training. The formal technical conclusion of the complaint has to be done by what's called the QM function, instead of being done by the plant manager or the default source. The plant manager and sales office manager are no further actively involved in the operational process of filing a complaint. The QM function, which is going to be based on knowledge of the complaint and the material itself and magnitude of the complaint, can be changed at any time. This allows for very high flexibility in the workflow. There's no automatic credit note approval process via the workflow like there is in Iris. Credit notes will have to be requested for approval by what's called a RAHOW task complaint, which is an internal task that can be assigned in Cosima to the sales office manager to approve of the credit note. Actions, as they were referred to in Iris, are now referred to as a status in Cosima, and complaints will go through the system from status 1, which is considered the initial recording of the complaint in the sales office, all the way through to status 6 when the complaint is marked commercially and technically finished. Some more changes. There is a plausibility check of subsequential costs through the QM function. So the QM function is going to estimate the expected consequential costs, and these are costs that differ from the material costs, such as if there are any handling costs, sorting costs, return shipment, etc. And they will look for large differences between what they expect the consequential costs to be and what the customer requested cost is. Now, in the event that there is a large difference between these two amounts, the QM function must approve of the customer request before it gets passed on to the sales office manager. Once a complaint is established, and by established, this means that once the complaint is assigned an ID number in Cosima, it cannot be deleted, but it can be set to what's called status 9, and this is when the complaint is canceled. There's an option for integrated 8D reports, and this will pull information directly from the complaint in Cosima as it has been entered. There's what's called a fact sheet, which is a management summary that's generated at the push of a button that will also pull information from the complaint. And this is what's going to be used when requesting credit note approval from the sales office manager. When multiple items are the subject of a complaint, there's no longer a leading article, but all the articles are going to be considered equal. This means that you'll be able to view statistical information about all the items as opposed to just the item name and quantity. There are some actions that are no longer going to be performed in Cosima as they were in Iris, and this is to include ABBs or deductions from payments. For now, these are going to remain in Iris. However, the Cosima complaint number or Cosima complaint ID must be referenced in Iris when filing an ABV. Credit note applications are done via what's called a RAHOW task complaint, and this is an internal task that's assigned to a RAHOW employee, such as credit note approval. And credit note approvals are going to be done by the sales office manager via email. So once a RAHOW task complaint is assigned, the sales office manager will receive an email with the fact sheet attached to it, and they will give approval of the credit note via responding to that email back to the sales office. So this is a process overview of the statuses that I was referring to. You can see on the left side of the screen there are pink and green bubbles, and the pink are going to represent items that are to be completed by the sales office, and the green represents items that are completed by the QM function. And at the top left of each box there is a yellow circle with a number in it. That represents the status of the complaint. So this is a brief outline of what each status is and a general overview. So in status 1, which is the initial recording of the complaint, this has to be done within 3 working days after the IDM is first notified. This is going to be done entirely in the sales office, and it's going to include recording the general complaint information that's received from the customer. Then the complaint will move to status 2, which is the final determination of the QM function. Now this is just the QM function that has been automatically assigned by the system based on the material, determining whether or not they are the correct person to make the justification decision of the complaint. If they are not the correct person, the QM function will have the opportunity to assign a new QM function who is better suited to make the justification decision based on knowledge of the material and the magnitude of the complaint. Now there is the special case for the QM function, which is in a non-complaint and a terms complaint, in which the QM function is the IDM. Status 3 is the decision on the justification. So this is going to be the QM function determining whether or not the complaint is justified, identifying default sources, fault types, running a return analysis, and the decision on the responsibility for technical closure. Generally, the QM function that was assigned is going to complete the technical closure. However, this can be done by a newly assigned QM function if necessary. If the complaint is justified, it will move to status 4. And status 4 is the technical conclusion and the commercial conclusion. So both the sales office and the QM function will be working on this status. The technical conclusion is going to be done by the QM function, either the one that was originally assigned or the new one that's assigned where appropriate. And the commercial closure is going to be done by the sales office via a RAHOW task complaint, and they're going to receive credit note approval or denial from the sales office manager. If the complaint is not justified, it will go to status 5, which is the checking of goodwill objection. And this will be done entirely in the sales office to determine whether or not it is appropriate to compensate the customer with a goodwill decision and whether or not it's economically advisable. Once status 4 or status 5 has been completed, the complaint will move to status 6, which is the complaint will be finished. So now we're going to go into some important roles in Cosima and then jump into some Cosima terminology. Now, some of the terminology is translated directly from SAP, so it may not be how you would see it in Iris. However, the principles of the terminology are the same, and the principles of the roles in Cosima are the same. So first there's the sold to party, and that's just the customer that is filing the complaint. There is the creator of the complaint, and that's the IDM or sales office associate, and they are going to be the recorder of the complaint, again through status 1 as well as working on the commercial closure. There's an expert, and this is an employee from an involved department that is needed in support, whether it be for the technical conclusion or any other factual aspect of the complaint. There's the commercial agent. The commercial agent in general is going to be the IDM or creator of the complaint, and they are going to make the decision on goodwill as well as complete the commercial closure. There's the QM function, which is a position that is automatically assigned based on the material that's the subject of the complaint, and they are going to complete the decision on the justification of the complaint, the technical conclusion, changing the QM function if necessary, estimating expected subsequential costs, and approving plausibility check costs. There's the payer, bill to party, and ship to party. In general, these are going to be the customer. However, in circumstances, they may differ from the customer. There's what's called a returns editor, and this is going to be the person that records the return results in Cosima. In general, it is going to be the QM function that requests a return and handles the return analysis. However, sometimes it can be a member that was from the shipping plant or a shipping employee as appropriate to process the return. There's the QM function that completes the technical closure. Again, this will generally be the QM function that has been previously assigned based on the material in the complaint. However, if it's more appropriate, the previous QM function can assign a new one to complete the technical conclusion. There's the buyer, which is the strategic purchaser, and this is when goods are bought into Rahal, that it's the member of the purchasing department who had purchased the goods from the supplier. Now into some terminology. There's a contact, and this is just the contact person on the customer's side, whoever the sales office or QM function is receiving information from. There's a description of the complaint, and this is going to be an identification aspect of the complaint that's going to include the customer name and customer number. There's the status. Now, we had referred to this earlier, and we will be able to see how to change status and what each status means and the steps that happen in each status during the training. And again, this is the workflow in Cosima. A complaint will go from status 1 to 6, and if it is set to status 9, which it can be at any point, the complaint will be canceled. There is the amount, and that is the net value per unit of material. In general, this will have to be inserted by the sales office manually at the initial recording of the complaint. There is an option to create a follow-up, and this is the creation of statements to internal experts, as well as the process for requesting credit note approval, again via what's called a Rahal task complaint, which we will be able to work directly with once we begin working in the system. There's the categorization of the complaint, which is going to be identifying the fault types and additional sub-fault types. There's the cost difference, and this is the difference between the expected consequential costs as determined by the QM function and the final costs that are defined during the customer claim by the sales office. And again, the QM function is going to have the final check between these two if the difference is too large. Some more terminology.